Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation by Global GEG. Global GEG is an amazing group of voluntary educators that aim to make the world smaller, basically. Okay, I might be asking one of my amazing co-hosts here to bring Mandy Tolan in for her amazing presentation, because right now I am very laggy and yes, amazing presentation. So I don't know if someone can help me.
All right, I'm on the screen. Are we ready?
I think so. I can't see anything, but if you can see yourself on the screen, then you are awesome.
Okay, I
can introduce yourself.
Well, hi guys, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mandy Tolan. I am a high school math teacher in Missouri. Have been in education for quite a while, and I'm excited to share with you some of the things I do in my classroom today using Google and all of its amazing tools. Also, I wrote a book. It's called Make Math Not Suck. So some of the activities today are in the book, but a lot of the activities you're going to see are extra activities. And if you would like to see more, you can buy my book.
Okay, so thanks for that, Mandy. I've just managed to unlag just at the perfect timing. So thanks so much for that. I'm going to add your slide deck to the stream. Okay, and I'm going to take myself off. So enjoy, have fun.
All right. And I think the information for this is in the chat window. So if you would like to look at this presentation as I present it, a lot of the links I have in here are clickable. They're set as templates. So if it's something you would like to keep, you can just hit save the template and you can have it to alter and use in your classroom. So this is my contact information. I would love if you followed me on Twitter. I love to see what people use that I've shared, or even if I haven't shared it, if it's something cool that you do and you're willing to share, I would love to learn from you as well. So today's presentation, and it looks like I have an old bit.ly up there at the top that I didn't get rid of, so don't use that one. That's not the correct one. Today's presentation is a buffet of information. So if you've ever gone to a buffet, there's so much to choose from. And if you try to load your plate up with every single thing that you see today, you're going to leave not feeling very good. You will have way too much information. So I'm going to suggest to you, as I suggest to my children every time I take them to a buffet, put a little bit on your plate. Try that. And then if you like it, you can come back for a little bit more information later, because you can save the link to this presentation and you will have it. All right, so here we go. The very first activity I did involving technology was a drag and drop activity. At the time, we had iPads, and I used Apple Pages to create this very first activity for my geometry classroom using proofs. So I have two rules when using technology. It either has to make things better for me, or it has to make the learning better for the students. And if I can't say yes to either one of those, then technology is not the answer to it. So the reason that I started creating this in a digital format is because I don't like to cut out paper. I teach multiples of the same classes, and I would cut out these drag and drop proof activities on paper, and kids would write on them, or they would lose one of them, and the next class would come in and I would have to have extra copies of it. And it just got to be a really big hassle to try to save all those papers year after year or create them again and cut them out. And so having a digital version of this was really something that I enjoyed. Well, then that first year we had those iPads for 1 year, and then they threw us into Chromebooks. So I quickly transitioned everything over to Google. And you know what? Having all these activities when we had to go on remote learning in the spring was amazing, because I had activities already created, like this balancing equations activity, where I had the manipulatives over here at the side, and the students can just drag them over. And we would do these balancing equation activities. We could still do them remotely because we had all of the supplies already there and ready to go. This is just an example that we gave them, showing them how you would use the balancing equations. And then I just duplicate this slide multiple times and then let them do their own practice problems with it. There are a lot of other examples here. When we do rate, time, and distance, we use the cars so they can understand which direction the vehicles are going, because my students have a hard time understanding what's happening. Are the cars going towards each other? Are they going away from each other? And so I created that activity. This is one that I use in stats class, where we talk about correlation coefficients. So many things that you can do. And if you go to my blog, Make Math Not Suck, I have shared so many of these. I have one blog post where I have everything I've ever created as far as the drag and drop goes for algebra. All right, so this activity. First of all, I want to talk about those activities that you do in your classroom where kids are so excited that they leave your classroom talking about math. That was the whole idea behind my book, Make Math Not Suck. I wanted kids to enjoy math. I wanted them to leave my classroom talking about how excited they were. This is one of those activities. So each year before we do surface area and volume, I review area. So you can review area by spending a day on it, throwing up all those area formulas again, and go through them, work some practice problems. But that's really boring. I don't even like doing it as a teacher because it's so boring. So one of my Google Innovator friends, Micah Shippey, shared on Twitter how he had his students make apps. And they were making it for their school, just some information about their school. Well, I'm a huge proponent of find an idea that you like and see how you can alter that idea to use it in your classroom. So I decided, instead of going through all these area formulas again, my students would make an app. So for each app, they had to have an example, they had to have the formula, they had to have a home button to take them back. And so here's one of my student examples. They're just published Google Slides. That's all they are. And then there's instructions on the sheet. If you click on, if you click on the phone, it takes you to my blog post. So you can see some more of the examples, and you can see the activity sheet that I gave them as they went through. But you click to enter, they can click on whatever formula they want. They had to have the formula, they had to have an example, and then a back to home button. My students were so excited about this. I had planned for 2 days. The first day I introduced it, I let them work. The next day I was going to let them finish and then teach them how to put it on their phones. They came back the next day with it finished, already loaded on their phones, because they were so excited about it. The best part of this story is that the first year I did this, a couple of months later, a girl came into my classroom and she was so excited. Her little brother in late elementary school was working on volume, or was working on area. And so she pulled her app out on her phone and let him use her app as he was going through his homework assignment. She was excited because her brother was really impressed with what she did, and she felt like an amazing math person because of this app. Once again, that's what I'm about. I'm about making students enjoy math. I'm about letting them find that joy in it. And so that's a win in my book right there. And we were actually just visiting about Desmos right before this presentation started. And so a lot of what I used to do through these performance events, you can now do through Desmos. But if you're not familiar with Desmos, then Google Slides is still a really wonderful place where students can get practice answering those performance event types type questions, or even graphing. So this is a zombie activity that one of my friends had on paper. Once again, I decided to try this digitally because we wanted our students to practice those digital skills. And so the students use just the line tool right inside of a Google slide, and they're able to do this activity that way. Desmos is also a great option, but if you're not familiar enough with that, this is something that you can do as well. So I don't like repeating myself a lot with my students. I'm not saying I never repeat myself, but it's not something that I like to do. So I will always put the instructions on a Google slide or a Google Doc so that my students can go back and read the instructions. And that's actually the first thing I say to them when they say, hey, am I supposed to? Like, did you read the instructions again? If you did, I will help you. But if not, go read the instructions first and see if you can figure it out. I think it's a great skill for students to be able to read the instructions and learn what to do. But I also give them that grace if they've read it and they don't understand it, then I will help them. So I'm just going to click on the geometric jack activity and kind of show you what I'm talking about. By the way, geometric jack started for me my very first year of teaching. I was a brand new baby teacher and I had to teach these constructions using the compass. And as I was practicing my constructions on paper, I looked down and I thought, oh, wow, that kind of looks like a jack-o'-lantern. And so from there, I've always done this geometric jack activity with my students. Now, I haven't always done the geometric jack activity like this because when I first started teaching, Google wasn't a thing. We're not going to talk about how long ago that was. So I was able to put animations in here. So once you click use the template, you'll be able to see these. But there are animations in here showing the students how to do the constructions. So the instructions are all right here, and they are able to follow along and do that. All of the activities that you see here have the instructions built right in. Now, I do want to show you the circle vocabulary project. The reason I shared it is because I have the instructions and the scoring guide attached. But I want to show you these vocabulary circle activities. So this is done on paper, but when we went virtual in the spring, we created a digital version of this so students could use Google Drawing or Google Slides if they wanted to create the picture, or they could still do it on paper and then just take a scan of it. So it's just a way to visually display the vocabulary that they had looked up. And I have been doing this activity for 5 or 6 years, and my students always really, really enjoy it. Explain your thinking. These are also kind of along the lines of exit tickets. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, I've been sending out my sets of exit tickets that I have created more recently. These explain your thinking activities. Some of these are also posted on my blog. The one thing I really like about this is that students have to work on them until they get the answer correct, or until their thinking on whatever the topic is correct. So I use the comment window inside of Google Slides, and I can ask a question or prompt their thinking just a little bit, and I send it back to them. If I have to send it back to a student more than twice, then I try to conference with them one-on-one. So you can still do that even if you're remote. I will either type in a private chat with a student, or I have created a breakout room where I'll send them to a breakout room and then I'll join them in the breakout room and have a quick conversation with them about it to clear up the misconception. I don't want them to be distracted by other students in the classroom, but I also don't want them to get discouraged because they don't understand what they're doing. And so if you send it back to them 4 or 5 times, they will give up, and that's not what we want. We want them to persevere through this. And so if you've commented a couple of times, give them some grace and meet with them one-on-one in some way and kind of help them work through it. By doing it that way, I have students who buy into these a lot more than if I just kind of left them out there to flounder on their own. All right, so creating content. I make a lot of my own drawings when I teach math. I write a lot of my own questions. I do this because I can tailor it to what my students need. And using things that are already created, sometimes they work for me, but sometimes they don't. If you use Google Drawing, you can create some really amazing graphics for your math classroom. And it's stuff that you have just right there available to you. And so what I love about them, I'm going to move this over. They're transparent. So you can see I'm moving that over on top of it. So you can put them in other Google Docs, Google Slides. You can put them in Google Forms. I put them in Google Slides. You'll see some Google Slides activities here in a little bit, or not slides, but sheets. You can put them in Google Sheets as well, but you can also put them in Microsoft or any other document editing program that you're using. So these are really, it's just really a great tool. It's a tool that not everybody knows about. And on my blog, Infinitely Teaching, I do have two. On my blog, Infinitely Teaching, I actually have a little presentation in a Google slide to help you with Google Drawing if you're not familiar with it and you want to learn a little bit more about how to use it. So Equatio, if you use Google, I really, really, really recommend that you sign up for the teacher version of Equatio. It's free. You get access to the full features of Equatio as an educator. And it's more than just an editor. So I do love the editor. That's this first part. You can just type in really simple equations, type in words like sum, and it'll bring up the summation. You can type in, the caret for squared. So it can read your LaTeX, but you also have a LaTeX button if you want your more complicated equations to go in, which I really like. But for me, if you go to this math space that's built in, so it's this weird looking little icon right up here. If you go to this built-in math space, there are so many additional graphics in there that you can create. So if you can't get a good three-dimensional figure in Google Drawing, then you can get a good three-dimensional figure in math space. It also has the pie charts where you can segment them however you would like. It has the fraction bars that you can segment however you like. I absolutely love that feature. There is also a built-in Desmos graph. I am going to show you a quick trick later. Like I said, I absolutely love Desmos, but I do have a trick for graphs later that I will share with you. But it is built in, so you can just type it in and it'll drop the graph in if you would like to use it that way as well. Okay, I love to put stickers on my students' work. And since we do a lot of our activities digitally, I wanted to make some digital stickers. So I have a blog post on how to create these custom stickers in Google Drawing and then use Google Keep to put them on your paper. So I'm going to slide this over. If you look over here at the side, when you have a Google Sheet or a Google Slide, open, there's a Keep button right here at the side. And if you click on that, it will load your Google Keep. And I put my stickers in here. And once you have them loaded in here, you can just drag them over to your page. And you have your stickers then right there in your students' work. I love that feature of Google Keep. So if you're interested in making animated stickers, which I did not know my high school students love these animated stickers. Who knew that my students were going to love these animated stickers as much as they do? As a matter of fact, I have about 10 that I rotate through, and they told me the other day that I needed to make some more because they like them and they're tired of seeing the same ones. So I've been asked to create some new ones for them. But here's a blog post as well if you would like to create your own animated stickers for your classroom. Which takes us right into the stop motion, because that's really what the animated stickers are. They are a stop motion video that you can create. I create them for educational purposes. So I will create stop motions, which have been really powerful since we've gone into some remote learning situations. I've been able to put animations in my notes to help explain concepts a little bit more. I also have my students create stop motion videos. So this link right here will take you some student examples. This is a comic that I have my students create, and I have a whole section on comics here in just a second that we're going to talk about. But they created these transformation comics. So we do this during our transformations unit. And then they take their little character that they've made and they actually create a stop motion video as they read their comic and record their superhero going through the transformations in their comic. Once again, that was one of those activities where the students were so excited about the product at the end that they were showing people their math outside of class. I love that. So interaction without supplies. I started using digital supplies long before we had a pandemic. And here's why I started doing this. I asked my students to buy a protractor and ruler at the beginning of school. We use our protractor for the first time 3 weeks into school. And 3 weeks in, they would reach into their backpack to get that protractor, and it would be in like 7 pieces in the bottom because they've thrown textbooks on top of it, they've thrown their laptop on top of it, and now they don't have a protractor to use. So that was the reason that I created this the first time. I needed my students to measure angles, and their protractors were broken, and I didn't have enough for everybody in the classroom. So by using a transparent protractor, and I teach them how to use the arrow keys. I teach them how to use the shift key and the arrow keys to nudge things into place. And the students can then measure their angles. And it does take a little bit, but you know what? When you do this by hand, it takes a little bit to get it right too. And you have these tools right here for them to use. So this is an activity that I give them that 3rd week of school where they can go through, answer the questions. I did not do it on this one because this is one of my earlier activities, and I haven't gone back and updated everything, but I would recommend putting this on the master slide so that it doesn't move. Because right now, if a student clicks on this, it's going to move, and that will frustrate them. Trust me, they've told me many times that it is frustrating. So if you go up when you're in a slide, if you go up to, I go to View Master. I know some people go to, Format. I think it's under Format. But anyway, I always go to View Master, and then you can come down here to a blank slide and create, just right click on it and duplicate layout, and you can create as many blank slides as you need. And if you put that on the master slide, then it won't move, but you can also edit it. So I used to teach people how to set these as images in the background, but actually using the master slide is a better option because then if you need to edit it later, you can just go back into the master and edit it, and you don't have a picture there that can't be edited and you have to create it again. So this is a ruler activity. I also teach my students with enlargements and reductions that if you hold down the shift key, it's going to perfectly scale an image. And we try that out when we do these enlargements and reductions. They make an image and they scale it and then measure it to make sure that it is the proper scale factor. And then I recently made this deck of cards, and if you click on that slide deck, it actually gives you instructions on how to create different pages with different shuffled cards. So if you need digital cards to use, here's an option. So kind of a funny story. The reason that I created this digital deck of cards is because at the beginning of this year, everything in my classroom was thrown away because we had a major leak in our building over the summer, and then the air went out, and as a result, black mold filled our entire building. Well, black mold apparently is really difficult to get rid of, and as a result, they threw away every single item of anything I've ever kept in my classroom, including my decks of cards. And so I didn't have cards at the beginning of the year when I needed to use them. So I created a digital deck, and it's worked very well. So here are the comics that I talked about. This comic over here, and I forgot to bring my iPad down with me, but because it's shaped the way that it is, you can change the size to 8.5 by 11. Students can write their comics for this, and then you can send this to Kindle as long as the file size isn't too big, and you can send it to iBooks. And so students can put their comics on their phone, which is another activity that got them really excited. I had students who left my classroom showing other students these word problems that they had written because they were in comic format, and they were so excited about it. So this is the one that I started with. And that's the activity that I do with it. I have students create their own word problem. Then they have a little kind of interlude where their characters do something fun, and then they solve the word problem at the end. And then this is the example of the superhero transformation comic that I talked about. And I have links to a lot of my student examples there that you can see. They absolutely love this. I like to include writing in my classroom. We do a lot of writing in our classroom. My students write stories for the comics. They write stories for Choose Your Own Adventure stories, which is coming up next in my slide deck. I think it's important to show them that writing's not just an English class. And so we definitely include a lot of writing in my classroom. Which takes me to the Choose Your Own Adventure stories. So remember at the beginning how I said I'm a huge advocate of finding things that people are doing. It may not even be in the math classroom, and then figuring out how you could do that in your math classroom. This is one of those activities. So I read this book, I think it's been 5 or 6 years ago now, called Ditch That Textbook. And in that book, Matt Miller talks about Choose Your Own Adventure stories. I loved Choose Your Own Adventure stories growing up. I read them. I was the kid that would read one ending and then flip back to the page and then read the other ending and decide which one I liked better, which is kind of cheating. I don't think you're supposed to do that. But I love them. And as soon as I saw that he did this in his Spanish classroom, I immediately started thinking, how can I do this in my math classroom? And that's how this activity was born. And this is an example from my very, very, very first year of a student who created this. And he did such an amazing job. He actually drew all of these pictures on his iPhone with his finger. So every single image in here is an image that he drew by hand. And so here's the idea. They have to tell the story, but they also have to solve problems as they go. One of the answers is the correct answer. The other answer is an incorrect answer, but it has to be based on a common misconception. And so let's click on this one. Hopefully this is the wrong answer. And they had to explain what they did wrong. So he said, you probably added 320 instead of subtracting it. The first year, I gave them the option to return to the problem or continue on. We've since changed that, and they now have to just take them back to the original problem to resolve it, which obviously it's just the other choice, but they've already explained the misconception in there. And so then when you click on the next one, you congratulate the person, and then you continue your story with the next prompt. So I have used these just as a culminating activity at the end of the unit, but I also in my geometry class, so if you look at like the wizard school down here, my students do this as their assessment for the end of the unit. And during our remote learning time last spring, we actually gave them the option they could take a test or they could create one of these projects. And the majority of my students created the projects, and they had such a good time with it. One of my students, because my kids get to use Bitmoji in the classroom, my tech people are nice enough to unlock that for me when it's time to do one of my projects. And then when we're done, they lock it back down. She recreated a High School Musical Choose Your Own Adventure story, and she made a Bitmoji character for every character that was in High School Musical that she used. So I don't know how many email accounts she had to set up to do that, but she would just log into that email account and then pick the Bitmoji that she needed. Her story was amazing. Her math was amazing. And I actually got an email from her mom after school ended, because we did that in the spring. We were completely remote at that point in time. And her mom emailed and said how excited she had been about doing that project. And it meant a lot to her mom because she had not been excited about school since we had gone into lockdown. And to see her student get excited, to see her child at home get excited about something, she said she sat and cried. And I said, well, I don't know if I'd have been that excited about it, but I was thankful that she let me know that that project meant a lot to that student. And she found joy in that math in a time where we weren't finding joy in a whole lot of things. I love, love, love Google for differentiating my classroom. Google Classroom. And if you are on Canvas, Canvas does the same thing. I can't speak to any other LMS systems because I use Google Classroom and Canvas. But you have the ability to select the students that you would like to assign to. And so we have these differentiation days built into our algebra classrooms because we are standards based. And students are able to pick the standards that they need to work on. And then I can create in Google Classroom these slide decks of the things that they are going to work on for the day. So I might have 2 or 3 students working on one topic. I have 2 or 3 students working on another topic. But because they're self-checking, I can just walk around and help students where they need help. And I'm not sitting with one group while everybody else is trying to do something on their own without any assistance. So here's kind of what they look like. This is factoring a GCF and just some different ways. So we did a little introduction. We call this Trident. I know some people call it factoring by grouping. We call it Trident because it kind of looks like a trident when we're done with it. And then a difference of 2 squares. And so here's kind of how it would work. You start off with the problem. You can slide this out of the way step by step if you want to check, or if you get stuck and you're not sure what to do. Over here, they can slide this out of the way if they want to check and see which method they would use. And then when they're finished, they can slide this out of the way and they can check their answer. These do take a little bit of time to develop. So over the years, and we've been doing these differentiation activities for quite some time. Over the years, we built quite a few of these activities. But I share all of these on my blog. And if you are on the presentation, here's a link to another presentation that some colleagues and I did at our state math conference, where we share even more of these. And so we have these available. You are free to use them. And we actually love it when people use them because we put a lot of time into them. And we love when other people can benefit from that as well. Okay, so I like to do collaborative slides in my classroom. And I talk to people a lot of times that do not like to do collaborative slides in their classroom for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks today. Hopefully that will help you use these a little bit better. So maybe it's not quite as frustrating for you. The very first thing I do is a collaborative slide activity at the beginning of the year where students do a get to know you activity. And then this last year, I did this collaborative slide activity using the locker idea, which I do share on my blog, but you saw it all over Twitter. So the students, first of all, get to learn Google tools when we do it. They get to learn how to crop pictures. They get to learn how to use the word art that's in there. So on day 1, I'm teaching them the skills that we're going to use all year in my classroom because we use Google Slides all the time. Plus, they're getting to know a little bit about each other, which is really important because in my classroom, we call it a classroom family. And in order to become a family, you have to get to know each other. And so this is the first step for us to kind of get to know each other. But one of the things that people find kind of frustrating is that when kids are first creating those slides, and it's a frustrating experience for adults too. You'll create a slide and then somebody snags your slide. So you create another slide and then somebody snags your slide. And so if you are going to do this, I will recommend, and this may be down there too far. I can't click on it. There we go. I recommend, if that's a frustration for you, set this up ahead of time. And so this is one where I put everybody's name in it ahead of time. And I pulled this one before the activity was finished. But this gives you kind of an idea of what it looked like. They were each assigned a type of symmetry, and then they either had to go out and take a picture, or they had to go find a picture that had the symmetry. And then they were supposed to put the lines in it. So like this person drew their line in, but some of them didn't get that part done. Like I said, I snagged this and made a copy of it before they were completed. But you can see some of the stickers that I've dropped in here. This one was a few years back, so this is before I had my animated stickers. I can tell you my kids now would insist that they had those animated stickers. But that's one tip. Create it ahead of time. Put their names on each slide if you want them to do that. I love to use collaborative slides with vocabulary. So I will have a vocabulary word and assign each slide to a student. They will have to define it and then find an example image to go along with it. And then when they're finished, they have a completed slide deck of all of the vocabulary that they need for the unit that they can go back and reference. So I am friends with Tara Martin, who started Book Snaps, and it's actually Book Snaps that brought me to Tara. She shared it on Twitter one day, and I saw it. I'm a very visual learner, and I love Bitmojis. That's one thing about me. If anybody asks, they know I love Bitmojis. So I saw these Book Snaps, and it just spoke to me as a learner. And of course, with everything I do, if it speaks to me, how can I use this in the math classroom? So I immediately came up with this idea of using math snaps in my classroom. And I reached out to Tara, like, I love your book snaps. I have this idea. I'm going to do these things called math snaps. And she got back to me and she's like, well, another mathematician has also reached out to me because they had the idea of math snaps as well. She said he just messaged me about an hour ago. So I like to tell people I came up with the idea of math snaps, but we may have come up with it at the same time. It's okay. It doesn't matter. Math snaps are out there now, and this is how I use it with my students. So this activity, we had catapults where we were out in the hallway and the students launched the catapults. They collected the data from that, and then they had to come up with the equation that would go along with the parabola that was created when they launched their catapult. And so what I loved about it is the processing behind the images that they used, talking about the maximum height, and students would use Bitmojis that kind of related to the maximum height. This student, you can tell, used some of the tools inside of the drawing features these were actually in Google Drawing, but the drawing features are also available in Google Slides. Absolutely had a blast with these. I do have some examples on my blog about using this in algebra for linear equations as well. I do like learning with games, and there is a difference between game-based learning and then games in the classroom. So this first one is actually just games in the classroom. I do have a link to Alice Keeler's website where she has coordinate battleship template. If I find something that's good that I like to use, I will use it and definitely give credit to the person that you used it or that you borrowed it from. So there's no need to recreate it. Alice's template works really well. But the activity that's in the top corner, this memory game activity, I want to tell you the story behind it. I've mentioned before how much I do not like to cut paper. I do not like to cut paper. And my teammates came to me and they're like, we want to do this activity as a memory game where they have to match the linear equation to the graph. And I said, that's a great idea, but that's a lot of paper to cut out with all of these groups. And we teach it 4 times. And imagine how many copies of this we're going to have. So let me work on it and see if I can come up with a digital version of it. I'd like to say that they had perfect faith in me. They didn't. They actually went ahead and printed out their copies, assuming that I was not going to figure out how to do this. So I went home that night and I came up with a way to make this memory game in Google Slides. And it's a really simple concept. You put the content on your bottom layer. So you would put that in your master slide, and then you put your cards on top of it. And you click on a card and you hit delete. You click on another card and you hit delete. If it's a match, you keep it deleted. If it's not a match, you hit undo twice, you put the cards back, and the next person goes. So I would also like to say that didn't take me very long to figure out, but it actually took me a couple of hours of trying different things before I realized what a simple solution that it was. But if you would like to make your own memory game, and this is one of those activities that you can share with other content areas. I have helped a ton of elementary teachers make these. One of our high school science teachers did this with the elements, the periodic table of elements. She made one of these. So you can do this in other content areas. It's not just a math thing. But then there's a game-based learning. And I also really like to do game-based learning in my classroom. This idea came from John Meehan. He does something called a QR break-in. So the kids scan a QR code, they have a task to do, and he plans it for one class period. It looked so fun. And so I decided to create this for a review unit. So this is a unit where we reviewed equations of lines, things that they'd already done before. So we spent about 2 weeks on this. So mine didn't do it in one day. I also didn't use QR codes. I set everything up in Google Classroom. Now that we've transitioned to Canvas, I'll just set everything up in Canvas. And students had tasks that they could go through. They worked together in a group. It was really amazing when we went remote last spring. We were able to do this activity in a remote setting. Sometimes we were in breakout rooms together working. Sometimes the tasks were individual. So I had to change it up just a little bit, but we were still able to do these types of activities. They really, really enjoyed it. So much so that I created a second one for them that I used later that year as well. I have also used the same concept with the faculty at my school. I came up with a technology game. So one of our focuses a couple of years ago was learning new pieces of technology. So I sorted everybody in my school into houses like you would in Harry Potter, and then they worked together to learn different technology tasks. So you can do this with adults too. So I've said I am not a paperless teacher. I use paper foldables in my classroom. So my 2 rules: will it make my life easier, or will it make the learning better for the students? And if it meets that second criteria on these foldables, that's when I will put it in a digital format. So going to the parabola scavenger hunt, I did have some QR codes posted around the school next to a picture. And so when they found the picture, they had to decide, was it the initial height? Was it the x-intercept? And they would scan the picture. I had it scaled perfectly so they could drop it right into their digital foldable. And then they had to go to the internet and find another picture where they could label the exact same thing on another picture. So it was just helping them identify the key features of a parabola. Could we have done it on paper? Yes, they could have found a picture, but then if we wanted to put it in the foldable, we would have had to print it off, and then they could write on it. And so it's just a lot easier to do this in a digital format. The same thing for my transformations foldable. I teach my transformations foldable digitally because I'm teaching the skills that they're going to need when they do their transformation comic. So I can teach both things at once, the content and the skills, the digital skills, while I teach through this foldable. So like I said, it makes their learning a little bit better. Not necessarily easier for me. This was one where it was definitely focused on making it easier or making it better for the students. You can use these digital platforms to make activities for your students where they get up out of their seats. So if you've been around the internet at all, you have seen Dance Dance Transversals. This is just the one that I made. There are so many of them out there that are already available. I tell a story in my book, so I don't want to give it away, but I do tell a story in my book about how Dance Dance Transversals had such an impact on a student that I didn't even realize. And so I really encourage people to try these activities, get your kids up out of their seats, get them moving. I'm a very big proponent of a safe space. So I do not make my kids get up and participate, but by the time we do this activity in my classroom, we have already built kind of that community culture. And rarely do I have a student who won't try it at least once, because it's a safe space for them by that time. If I did that in the first 2 weeks, I would have a lot of students who would not participate in it. So you just have to build that culture to let them. But please don't embarrass them either. I also have students who will tell me how teachers have forced them to do activities, and it actually makes them shut down and not want to participate in other things. So I'm going to ask that you not do that to your students either. But Dance Dance Transversals was such a powerful player in my geometry classroom that I wanted something similar in my algebra classroom. So I created this activity called Show Me Your Moves. And it's talking about transformations of equations and what happens when there's a negative in front of the slope, and what happens when you add a number or subtract a number at the end. And we have it for absolute value functions, for quadratic functions. And so we were able to get up and do kind of a movement activity with that as well. So I was kind of sharing with some of this group beforehand that I introduced standards-based learning to my kids. It's been a few years ago. I can't remember exactly how many. Guys, this was such a game changer. If you can, and you do have to get approval from your administration, because standards-based isn't something that every school supports. I'm not going to say that every administrator that I have had has always been supportive of it, but I do have some very powerful data to show what an impact it has. So this is the data sheet that my students have. There's a second tab at the bottom where we have a reflection piece. So after every assessment that I give, students go through and they reflect on what they did well on, and then they reflect on what they still need to work on. This is actually a copy that my students keep, and then I have access to their data as well. The very first year I did this, I think the thing that impressed me the most is that students, when they know what they need to work on, are willing to spend the extra time if they know they have the opportunity to improve. And I had a student walk in after school one day, and she's like, Mrs. Tolan, I know I need to work on solving literal equations. She knew to call them literal equations because it's on her sheet. She knew exactly what it was she was missing. Can you write me some additional practice problems that I can practice with so I can get better? She wasn't asking me to increase her grade. She wasn't asking me for extra credit. She was asking me to help her learn. That was such a powerful moment for me to understand that students really do want to learn, but a lot of times they don't ask because we don't have things set up in a way that allows them that opportunity to learn. Because if you give a test and they can't retake the test, or they can't correct the test, they can't do better, then why would they come in and ask for help? Why would they come in and try to improve? Because it's not going to do anything for them. And I know, yes, the learning process does, but in a student's mind, it doesn't do anything for them. So having this tracking system for students, having that reflection piece, that's a huge, huge piece to it. Super important. So if you're a Google Sheet person, if you're not a Google Sheet person, these might not be the activities to start with. I'm going to say that up front. This is probably not a good place to start. But if you are a Google Sheet person, these are some really cool self-checking activities that you can do with students and build right into Google Sheets. This top one is actually a puzzle that I have in one of my escape rooms, which we're getting ready to talk about here in just a second. This activity right here, this is an activity that progresses. So until they get the answer correct, it will not progress to the next page, which is really kind of cool. I learned this from Alice Keeler. So she taught me, she's the spreadsheet queen. She's the one that taught me how to do this. Mad Libs was shared, and if you go to my website, it actually is linked to there, and it will tell you who I got the idea from. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But somebody shared their Mad Lib idea, so I created a Halloween Mad Lib version for my students as a review one day. And then I created this activity this year. It's just a pixel art activity. as they enter the correct answer, part of the picture appears at the side, and my students really love that. They actually asked me again just this week when I was going to make another one of those for them. I also love to do escape rooms in my classroom, and I have 2 physical breakout kits that I have created on my own, and I love to do physical breakouts in my room. There are a couple of things about those physical breakout rooms that I don't like. One of the things I don't like is that I have to run 2 sets at the same time, which because my classes are kind of big, and that's a little chaotic. And right now in the pandemic situation, we don't want people touching things that other people are touching, so it's just not going to work. The other thing that I don't like about it is that not every student gets to experience every problem. Digital escape rooms kind of fix all of those for you. So I've used it to introduce content. So this first one is called Data Crunchers. I use it to introduce our data unit. Sometimes I use it as a review. So the triangles only is an example of one of how I use it to review content. And then this quadrilateral homes, I use that one as an assessment. So you can, and I have so many of these. If you click on this Wakelet, I think it takes you to all of them that I've created that you are free to use. One tip that I would give you if you want to track the answers that students are doing is create your own Google form and have them submit their answers on that. Or I have my students put their face up to the screen and take a picture of their face next to the screen. And that's what they submit to me with their answers on the screen. They think it's funny, by the way, because I actually take a picture of myself with my face next to the screen to show them exactly what I want. So that's another way to check to make sure that students are doing the work if you want to use it as an assessment. This is another Google Drawing idea. I don't know if people realize the quality of graphic that you get from Google Drawings, but you can resize inside of file page setup, and you can actually do full poster boards. And so this is an example. I created this all in Google Drawing, and then I had it printed at my local print store, and I was able to put it on one of those tri-fold boards to kind of share my ideas with that. This is a poster that I've made for the classroom, but I've also allowed students to create posters, and I've had them printed and laminated for our classroom. So Google it's very high quality. It is a vector-based program, which means that if you create a very large size, it's scalable and it won't pixelate on you. If you have Chromebooks, you won't need this. But if you don't have Chromebooks, I like the Tab Scissors and Tab Glue Chrome extensions, especially if I'm using like GeoGebra, where I want to have instructions on one side and GeoGebra open in the other so they can create what they're doing inside of GeoGebra. So it's the first set of extensions I have my students install next to Bitmoji, because that is the first extension that I have my students install on their laptops when they get them. The example in here is not math, and that's because I discovered this when a teacher friend of mine said, hey, I need to emulate the testing window. I need a reading prompt on one side and questions on the other. Can you help me do that? And I found Tab Scissors and Tab Glue and created this little tutorial to show them what they could do with it, and then realized I could absolutely use this in my math classroom. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This is not Google, but if you want high quality, professional looking graphs to use in your own content, so Google Forms, in your slides, Graph-Free is an amazing site. You can do number lines, you can do piecewise functions. Obviously, you see some inequalities here and some absolute value functions. And you just right click and copy and you have it there. And so because I use Google so much to create my own content, I use Graph-Free to create my graphs, and I really love the quality that I get with it. Okay. I hope your brain hasn't exploded at all. Nobody interrupted me, so I don't know if there were any questions in the chat. So we will definitely stick around here at the end and answer any questions that anybody has. But if you would like to get in touch with me, there is my email address. People email me all the time. I would love to hear from you. If you use something of mine, I would love if you shared it. It really makes my heart happy to know that other people find value in what I've shared. Twitter is my main place to go. I am also on Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, you're going to get pictures of my kids as well. Most of my kids are adults. My last baby is a senior in high school. So you will be getting some pictures of him here before too long as he gets ready to leave the nest. I do have a Facebook group, Make Math Not Suck group. I'm not on there as often, but I have some wonderful people that help me manage that Facebook group. And I do try to drop in about once a week if people have questions. And then these are the links to my 2 blogs. So if you click on either one of those, it will take you to my blogs. And last but not least, if you would like to buy my book, Make Math Not Suck, like I said, I shared a few of the ideas in here, but there's so much more in there if you would like to read about it. And if you want to sign up for email updates, I do send out a weekly newsletter where you guys will get a first look at my blog posts, some upcoming events, some different things that I talk about there. So if you'd like to sign up for email updates, you also get a little freebie. It's a digital planner. So, all right.
Thank you. Can you hear me or am I muted?
I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, everything's lagged again, but I wanted to say huge thank you to you, Mandy. That was an amazing presentation. And although people didn't ask questions in the chat, everyone was so excited. Everyone was like, this slide deck is amazing. Look at all these resources. I can't wait to use this with my students. Or like they was like, I want to share, with my staff. I really want to put in a newsletter. That they had like all these. They were super inspired by your presentation. So we really do appreciate you being able to come in and present for Global GEG. Really do appreciate it, Mandy.
Thank you.
I want to say a huge thank you also to everyone who's watching. And yeah, Mandy, do you have anything last words? Oh, not last words. Last things that you want to share at all? Otherwise, just want to thank you again.
All right. Nope, I'm good. Thank you guys for hosting.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.